Hi there, welcome back to the Backpacker Coach. Today we have another special episode of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon, the girls missing from Panama. In this episode, we're going to be covering two main things, and we're going to be going over the night photos in respect of the weird glowing orbs that are in quite a few of the pictures, as well as we're going to also be going over some new information that has come about because of a very ingenious guy who has done some 3D modeling of the night photo area. So we're going to go over some of those things as well. So let's get into it. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about was something to have to do with the night photos, and that has to do with the glowing orbs that happen to show up in some of the photographs. And that's something I wanted to kind of talk about and go over some interesting things about how they were created, why they might have happened, what they might be, what they might not be, that kind of thing. So first, how many times did these orbs show up? So if we look at what was released, at least we know from what was released, 10 times they showed up with this weird orb thing. So first you might be asking, why does this happen? Why do we have this weird orb thing? But seriously, why in the world are there so many of these glowing orbs in the night photos? So generally speaking, why I can tell you, something got in front of the flash, most likely a finger or a hand, some part of a body, because you can tell because of the pinkness that we know. The problem is we don't know why. We don't know why somebody had kept putting their finger in front of the flash. And that is the first problem. And I'll go over a couple interesting things of where it actually was a little bit later in this video, because that even makes even less sense. For starters, I'm going to go over how this was created and what the different things are in those images, because some things I think are misunderstood of what are in the images, and so you'll get a better understanding of what actually you're seeing and how these were created. And most of all of those images, except for possibly this one, but I think even most of all of the ones that have these orbs, they were lightened, and so you should be able to see probably more of what were in these images, but there's no way to see them because they were all lightened to the point where we can't actually see what is going really on there. So that's a little unfortunate because we can't tell what part of the body that is, whether it's a finger or a hand or an elbow or who knows what. So that's a little unfortunate. But I'm going to go over some of the tests that I did and show you kind of how I got to some of the conclusions that we're going to go over here. Alright, so first I wanted to talk to you about how did we get to these bottom two images here. How did they get so blown out that you just see this big white blob? So I'm going to show you how this happened. So what they did is, more than likely, when they were trying to figure out what was in the picture, what they did is they went to the levels on Photoshop, and all they did was I want you to watch these two pictures up at the top here. I took these two pictures, and all we do is we change the level. We're going to go up to about there. Now you can see how it's just blowing out, especially this one, how it's blowing out the top. You can't really see anything at all, but the little tiny reflections, which we're going to go over in a minute, show up pretty well. So you can see then how that just blows out all of the top. Anything that had any bit of information is completely gone. Now next, I want to show you let's cancel this for a second. I want to talk to you about these specific little white, these little things here. What are these? So I think a lot of people think that they're water drops on the lens. I think that's what some people think, and that is not what is the case. These are not water drops on the lens. If you had water drops on the lens during the day, you can pick it out. But during the night, I've tried taking pictures of rain during the night with water on the lens, and you can't see it. It's almost impossible to pick up. But what these are, and you can see these on both this one and on this one here as well when you lighten this one up. And I'll lighten that up again. You can see when I lighten that up like this, you can see them in here. What those are is the flash getting shot onto my hand, and that light reflects back into the camera, and what shows up is the light going through the aperture of the lens, and it kind of bounces back and forth, and so you actually see the aperture. This is the actual opening of the aperture of the lens, and it shows up a bunch of times because the way it bounces back and forth in the lens. And if you actually look at how they always will show up pretty much in the same exact pattern. So you can see there's one here, and then there's two here. It's the same thing. There'll be the one larger one and the two here and the third one here. It's very similar, and you can go through them and you can see the same pattern forming, and that's just because the way the light reflects back into the lens, showing the aperture. So that's what that is, just so you know. And there was pretty much no rain happening here, and there was no rain happening because I took this outside as well, but there was no rain happening as well. So you know that's how those little weird little lighter areas show up on the picture. So there you go. So you know how that works. But some of you might be asking, what is an aperture? All right, so little photography lesson here. So an aperture is very similar to like the iris in your eye, and an aperture controls the light, and it gets larger or smaller depending on what the camera needs, and you can see the aperture moving on a camera on the lens, and it opens and closes to whatever you need. And that's what you're seeing, is that little opening, and you see the reflection of that. As well as if you zoom up on those little tiny white reflections, you will see that they're not actually round. They actually have flat little edges, which that is the edges of the aperture. So that's how you can tell that that's the reflection of the light bouncing around, and that's the aperture. Also, if you look at my photos, there's this weird white thing, and that's a scratch that's on my lens, and that's why I was able to get the camera so cheap, because it had a scratch on the lens. So when light hits it, it shows up really very easily. So the next part I wanted to show you is I wanted to show you how I was trying to create these little white blobs, and so I did a couple different tests, and so I wanted to show you why I was trying to create these and what I was thinking of at the time. So the first test I did, I was out camping, and I decided to take a few pictures at night, and it was nice and dark. It actually was starting to sleet a little tiny bit, and you could see that I was able to get my hand at first in there, but I wasn't close enough to the flash, and then the other ones I was able to get close enough to the flash, but then I wasn't able to get my hand actually in the photograph. Now at the time, what I was trying to tell you is that I was under the assumption that they were trying to shield the camera from the rain. That was my original thought, and that's why I was trying to essentially use my hand to kind of shield the camera in different areas, trying to figure out whether that was something that they could do, how would it look, that kind of thing. That's what I originally thought. I also forgot at the time, but all of the images nearly were vertical. So that I'll show you a little bit later. Oh, and by the way, as you can see, when we were talking about, the reflection, you can see that they're all always in the same spot every time. Even if you lighten these up, they would be the same. So next, I tried it again, but still horizontal. But I was able to get my hand and also be able to get some good reflection back in the camera there. And that was better. So I was starting to get better with how that happened. But I had forgotten something by that point, like I said, that I forgot, hey, most of all the pictures were vertical. So I switched and did one outside at night and tried to do it vertically with my hand kind of trying to over the flash, because the flash would be now at the top. And I found out something very interesting with this, that when you put your hand like trying to shade the camera, like if it was like rainy or whatever, and then you would try to protect it, that really messes up the flash, much more so when it's vertical than when it's horizontal. So I had a heck of a time. That the problem is that once you would get too close to the flash and it would just block out half of the background or part of the background or almost all the background you could see in a lot of these. And this one here I took to show you of what it should look like just with a normal flash. And you can see how in this one, the first one, the second one, this one's completely black, this one's completely black, and these are completely black. These are more to what you would expect because of this, but because of the hand here. But like this one, there's no hand in the picture, and yet I blocked the flash. And this one as well, it blocked the flash. And then this one, you can see it blocked the flash. So I was having a hard time. I was actually blocking the flash a lot when I did these. And that started to make me realize that they were probably not trying to use their hand as to shield the camera, like their other hand to shield the camera. I don't know what they were doing, but they were certainly not shielding the camera from the rain. Though we obviously know it was rain. We've done hundreds and hundreds of pictures looking up at rain. We all know what rain looks like when you're looking up at the rain. We know it was rain. But for some reason there was another hand or another part of a finger or a part of an arm or something that was getting in the way for some reason other than trying to protect the camera. So that is still a mystery. There are some people that say that they were handing the camera back and forth and they were trying to flash the camera to be able to see where the person's hand was so they could, move it back and forth. I don't really see that as being a way to be able to see where your hand is. I mean, if they were sitting that close together, they should be able to know to hand the camera off right back, back and forth to one another. So I don't really quite, it's, possible that they were sitting like that, but we'll go over that a little bit later. But I just don't, I don't know why they would just get in the way. It's just very strange. If they were trying to pass the camera back and forth, I don't know why the hands were getting in the way. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But that leads us to the next part of what I wanted to show you. It was where the blob was and why they're on an odd part. Because if you look at these, they're all on the top or just a little bit on the edge of the top right. And now we're going to go look at all of the other original pictures and see what they look like actually orientated to how they were looking out. And let's see what that looks like. All right, here we are with all the photos that we have put together so we can get an idea of what the area looked like in respect of all the pictures that were put together and of what we have. So let me explain to you what we have going on here. So in front of us we have the rock, you know, with the stick and the plastic, and then as you look up further, look up until you get to about here, that's looking straight up in the air, and then as you look further up, you're actually looking more or less almost behind you, or right above, what would be above you or nearly behind you. Just so you know, that's the perspective of we're going from all the way from in front of you to nearly what's almost behind you. So now I put in the other photos and matched up the photos to this little Y, because you could pick out nearly either the Y or you could pick out some other foliage in the photographs to be able to match up. And then we're going to see where all these white blobs, where they all end up. So here we go. First one, second one, okay, so that's all of the images. So now if you notice, if I get rid of this one, it's a little easier to see. All the white blobs are on the right side. Almost all seem to be in this lower, the right hand corner or the up hand corner, but still always on this right side somewhere. So I'll go back through them again, going in reverse. So we can tell, at least we know that all of them, nearly all of them, are vertical, are close to being vertical. And we know that something kept getting in the way on that one side. Something that was, whoever was taking the pictures, something was on the right side of whoever was taking the pictures was somehow getting some part of a body part, some part of a finger, or something in the way. On this next section, I wanted to explore, can you get your fingers in front of the lens? And so we're going to go over a couple little things to see whether that's possible. So if you hold the camera normally, you can see that there's no way for me to get my fingers in front of the lens. There's no possible way. Even if I move to my second finger, my middle finger, there's no way for me to get my other fingers in front of the lens. But here's the interesting thing. If I change my position, so now if I change the position of the way I hold the camera and I hold it with my thumb, now look, I can get my pointer finger in the way. You can see my pointer finger can get in the way. And I will show you a couple pictures of what that looks like at night. So now I want to take these photos that we just did and I want to compare them to the night photos with the orbs and see what we can compare. See if there's anything similar, if there's not things that are similar, and is there anything that we can reproduce that looks the same. Alright, so here are most of the pictures of the glowing orbs. Now before I put the pictures that we just did on top to compare, I wanted to show you something that I just realized when I put this together that there are a couple things that nobody has talked about and nobody has actually noticed. And this is going to be kind of a little bit of a bombshell here that hopefully somebody might be able to figure this out at some point. So if you notice in all these pictures, now you know of course they're all actually vertical or close to being vertical, but if you actually look at all the pictures of these guys, you start to notice some patterns. Now, if you go back to that guy's video, they originally were saying in this video and this photo here that they were saying that they think that they could see hair. That's what they thought these lines were here. But if you actually notice, if you look at all of these photos, they have that same thing in all of the pictures. This weird hazy lump and these lines, you can see where I marked them all out. You can see them, they're exactly the same in every single picture. So it's doubtful that's hair because it's the same exact shape. Now what that is, I do not know. Could it be water maybe on the lens? Maybe. That's a possibility. Or could it be something else? I don't know what that is. But we certainly can tell that this weird shape, whatever it is in every single photo with the glowing orb. Every single one. To some extent, it picks up a little more in some than others, but it's all the same. And of course, you can also see the reflection of the f-stop in all the photos as well. All right, so now let's go and let's add in our photos that we just did and see if we can see any similarities or not any similarities. So what I did with these ones, I also lightened all of them just so they would look, kind of comparing apples to apples here. If we can compare these top four to these, at least there's some similarity from like this one and this one to certainly at least some of these in respect of the glowing orb, but I don't know if they lightened them so far that they blew out even the lighter areas. Like this is the part of the finger that was closer to the lens, and so it ends up looking, you know, like bright magenta here and here. So either they lighten them up past that point where that even blows out, or the finger was like not angled when it was next to the lens, if it was a finger at all, or something else was in front of the lens that wasn't quite as close. But here's another really interesting thing, and I'm not quite sure why this is. If you notice, the reflection is in the same spot, of course, in all these. It's interesting that in mine, the reflection, the main reflection part, is in this corner in most of them, except for this one. For some reason, I can't see it here. And I find that kind of interesting. I'm not sure if that's just because of whatever was in the way changes the spot of where this is at. I'm not quite sure. Maybe that's another video that we'll have to do down the road to see if where the object is changes the reflection of the f-stop. And there are two images here of this one and this one, which I would want to say that it's very unlikely that those are finger pictures, just because it would be very difficult to get your finger just up in the top corner up here, or it would be also very difficult to get your finger across the whole entire frame. Maybe it's possible, but definitely this would be very difficult to do, of putting your finger in the top, just the top right corner. That would be a little more difficult. So that, I believe, would definitely be something else other than a finger for sure. But it is possible, at least, that if you hold the camera the other direction, that it is possible to get your finger in the way, which it's possible that it could be that, but we still don't know what these other odd shape is that's in all the photos. And why is there the same shape in all the photos that have the glowing orbs? The only thing that I could possibly think of, besides maybe water on the lens, was water actually inside the lens. And you're wondering, why would there be water inside the lens? Well, one of the running theories is that early on in the very beginning, one of the girls dropped the camera into water, and that's why, and they had to let it dry out for the extended period of time before it would work again. And that's why you don't see any photos for a really long time, until like the 8th day or whatever it is. And so this could explain a possibility of why this same shape is in all of the photos. Maybe there is some sort of water somewhere inside the lens possibly, and when you reflect the light back up into the lens, that shows that off to some more extent than others, depending on how much light goes into the camera, which is definitely a possibility. So this is where it gets interesting. We've established that, as far as we can tell, nearly all of the images are nearly vertical, but we don't exactly know why they're vertical. So recently there was a guy out on the interwebs, one of the Kris, Kremers, and Lisanne Froon Reddit pages, that came up with an ingenious idea and was able to essentially make a 3D map of the area, as well as they were able to use photogrammetry. So photogrammetry is a very interesting thing. It's usually used in drones, taking pictures three-dimensionally. So you're able to not just see something flat, but you can actually rotate it three-dimensionally later on when you bring all the pictures back into our program. And it's a very cool thing, and it's used a lot in, like I said, in drone work. But this guy was able to use the photos and put them into some kind of a program, and then use photogrammetry into figuring out where the camera was. As well as he came up with a couple theories of how they were sitting and why the camera is vertical. And we're going to go over a couple of those findings of what they found, and I'm going to kind of just tell you of what I agree with, what I don't agree with, that kind of stuff. So first, I want to show you the first part here. Okay, in this three-dimensional model, you have Kris in front and Lisanne in back. And so this guy is trying to explain the reason of why most of the pictures are vertical. I'm going to actually show you this in actually real time, so it's a little easier to understand and actually see the camera, so you can actually see why the camera is actually the angle that it is. So I want you to do this with me. If you can grab a small camera like this one, or even I'll make a little piece of cardboard or a piece of wood or whatever, and hold it like you're going to be taking a picture, like right out in front of you, okay? And as soon as you do that, you're gonna put it above your head, and then I want you to put the camera out and work your way till the camera is out by your side, but still facing up in the air. Now if you look, what is the camera doing? As you notice, the camera is vertical, and that actually matches a lot of the night photos. So you have to remember that the little SOS thing is off, kind of maybe a little bit in front of you, over here, off to your right, and the actual little pieces of plastic and the sticks are way off to your right, or almost off to your right, but definitely they're not in front of you. And the edge right up here going up, there's an overhang above you. The only way to be able to see out there is by going up here and getting your camera away from the edge of the overhang, and to still go up, so you're actually seeing the sky and not seeing just the overhang. And if you zoom in to to that angle, you can see that's very similar to a lot of the same angle of a lot of the photos. All these match exactly how you'd be holding the camera. So this part is really amazing, and I think this part, I think you can say that I agree with. I think that that's a very good possibility of how Lisanne was holding and positioning the camera. Now I want to show you the photogrammetry. There are two images that they published, and one is looking down on the rock and the other one is looking across at the rock. And this is all the little orange numbers there are each photo that they took into relation to where they took it moving. And you can see it. So they moved in this small area, and that's the area of how they moved from one image to the next. So that's very interesting. And this is something that definitely, I don't think this can be debated. This is definitely something that is, I think, amazing, and there could be a lot of information and a lot of stuff gleaned from this, definitely. But I think that there needs to be a lot more research done on the position of where the camera was, how it was moved. There needs to be much more, something needs to be more studied here, definitely, because it's not really making sense. If they were sticking their hand up in the air, why is there so many things getting in the way? But obviously they weren't just sticking their hand up in the air. They were all over the place. From what you can see, in these photos, they were definitely moving all over the place here. So it still remains to be seen what's exactly going on here, because maybe something else could easily be going on that's not quite making sense yet. Or maybe they were, like I was saying, maybe they're, some other different position that makes even more sense. Or like how it was suggested in this other video, it's possible that both Lisanne and Kris were both trading off taking pictures. So I'm sure that they'll continue to keep working on this and make this even more clear. I wanted to briefly just look at the information here and realize that there's some interesting things that we can kind of glean from this that nobody really had talked about on this web seminar thing that you kind of get to watch. So if you zoom up on this, and this is looking directly down, so you're kind of bird's eye view, there's like essentially three areas that seem to be where most of the images were taken. There's this first area in here, and then there's this area back here, and then there's this area up here. Seem to be where those are where most of all the pictures were taken. And then you have one way back here, and you have one way over here, but most of them are kind of all confined in this little area. But this little area that they got confined in is very interesting, that they're kind of in three different groups. So what I'd like to see them do is marry these two images, so you can actually be able to see where this pattern is above the girls or next to the girls, so you can actually see where the camera was moving in relation to where the girls are, and also to these both pictures. So it would make a little more sense and be easier to see, because every time I try to rotate this picture here on the left, no matter which way I turn it, it doesn't seem to match this picture on the right. So what I was trying to say is I would really like to see them just marry these two images, so it'd be easier to see it in three-dimensionally of where the camera moved. So you could make a lot more sense out of both of these pictures. There is one thing that I would like to comment on one of the comments that they made in the video that they completely got wrong. And so I wanted to just go over that. And that has to do with how the flash works. In the video, they try to say that the flash, as time goes on, that the flash would take longer and longer for the flash to charge as the night would go on. And so that's the reason why the photos, of all the photos taken, that's why the time between each photo was getting longer and longer. That's not the way the flash works. It takes roughly 6 seconds, 5 seconds for the flash to charge, but it doesn't all of a sudden take longer. It always is the same, and then once the battery is depleted of energy, it just dies. So it doesn't change. The length of time for it to charge, to take a flash, doesn't ever change. It always is the same. So that's something I wanted to let you know. So that's something that they completely got wrong, and they are completely just making assumptions at this point. And that's something that is not the way the battery and the camera work. So let me tell you about what I agree with and what I don't agree with this video. So first, what I agree with. So if at some point the girls were ever in this kind of position, this would make sense because you would have to stay in this position to stay warm. This is definitely one of the most common positions for two people to try to stay warm if they were trying to survive. I can see that at least being for maybe 1 or 2 pictures, they could have been like this. But here's the problem. We've already established that you can tell that Lisanne had her arm out and up high, because that would be the only way for the camera to be mostly vertical. But if you notice, look at where Kris is as opposed to where Lisanne is. There's no possible way that Kris would get into the photographs. There's no possible way, because where were all of those blobs? They were way on the right side. And where is Kris? She's on the left. So that part doesn't make sense yet. That's where I'm hoping that looking at some of the areas of where the photos were taken, maybe they moved. Maybe they were in a slightly different position. My other issue is that they seem to think that they were trying to fire the flash to be able to see where they were so they could transfer the camera back and forth. I really do not think that that is why they would fire the flash. So first, we've already established that those pictures, Lisanne has her hand up and has her hand way up high. So she's not trying to hand the camera to Kris. The other reason is that if they are that close to one another, all Lisanne has to do is just swing her arm back in front of her and then put her arm down, and essentially she would be putting her hand on Kris's chest, or maybe even to her head, and then Kris would have to do is grab the camera. So there's no reason for a bunch of people flashing pictures or trying to figure out, and we've gone over all the reasons of why nobody would do this. There's no point for that at all. There has to be another reason for why somebody was getting in the way. Like I said before, as most likely they must have moved, and there must be another position, because the information that we have right now, that's just not making any sense. And speaking of positions, when it comes to why would one of the girls hold the camera in a different position, well, that could only be because of one reason, and that would be because their pointer finger would be broken or hurt. They couldn't hold the camera that way, so they would have to hold the camera a different way to be able to depress the shutter button, because it hurt too much to hold the camera a normal way. Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. So in the next video, we're going to talk about the XF data, specifically the temperature of the camera, and what the XF data talks about when it comes to the temperature of the ambient air, and how that's just a crucial part of this investigation, and what we need to just think about a few things about the temperature at night. And also put the link of this whole video so you can watch it and make a good decision for yourself of the information that they have created. I think the information that they have come up with is very useful, and definitely there's a lot more information to glean from this. So I will put the link down in the description below so you can watch their video as well. So keep looking out for that video, and we'll catch you next time out there.